I kept busy, tending my garden, meeting friends for lunch, attending my weekly book club at the library. On the surface, life continued normally, but underneath ran a current of sadness for what had been lost, or perhaps for what had been revealed about relationships I had thought I understood. On Saturday morning, I was surprised by a knock at the door. The video doorbell showed Rebecca standing on my porch alone, her expression uncertain. I opened the door, neither welcoming nor dismissive, simply waiting. "Hi, Mom," she said, her voice small. "Can we talk?" "Just us." I stepped aside to let her in. "Of course." We settled in the kitchen, always the heart of our family discussions, with cups of tea steaming between us. Rebecca looked tired, the fine lines around her eyes more pronounced than usual, her normally perfect manicure chipped at the edges. "Nathan's still angry," she began without preamble. "He feels like you don't trust us." I took a sip of tea before responding. "Trust is earned, Rebecca, and it can be lost when someone tries to take advantage of another person's perceived vulnerability." She winced. "We weren't trying to take advantage, weren't you?" I interrupted gently. "You presented me with legal documents you urged me not to read carefully. Documents that would have given you control over my most significant asset without my full understanding or consent. What would you call that?" Rebecca stared into her tea, unable to meet my eyes. "We thought we were helping. Planning ahead. Planning for what, exactly? For me to become incapacitated? Or for you to gain control of a valuable property? That's not fair," she protested, but weakly. "What's not fair is treating your mother like she's already incompetent when she's not," I replied. "What's not fair is making decisions about my life without including me in the conversation." Rebecca was quiet for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, she began to cry. Not the manipulative tears she had sometimes used since childhood to get her way, but deep, body-shaking sobs that seemed to come from somewhere raw and real. I waited, giving her space to express whatever was emerging. "I'm so scared, Mom," she finally managed between sobs. "All the time. Since David left, since I had to start over at 45, with half the savings and twice the expenses. I look at my future and I see nothing secure, nothing certain." Her vulnerability caught me off guard. Rebecca had always presented herself as capable, controlled, managing her divorce, with the same efficiency she brought to her career in public relations. "The house," she continued, wiping her eyes with a napkin I handed her. "It just seemed like a safety net. Something solid in a world where everything else feels like it could disappear overnight." "Oh, Rebecca," I sighed, reaching across the table to take her hand. "Why didn't you just talk to me about your fears? Why this elaborate scheme to take control without my knowledge?" She shook her head, embarrassed. "It was Nathan's idea, initially. He said you wouldn't understand, that you'd resist any suggestion that you might eventually need help. And I went along with it because it seemed easier than admitting how terrified I am about my own future." The admission hung between us. Not an excuse for their behavior, but at least an explanation that made more sense than simple greed or callousness. "I understand fear," I told her quietly. "After your father died, I was paralyzed by it for months. The thought of continuing without him, of making decisions alone after 48 years of partnership. It was overwhelming." Rebecca looked up, surprised. "You never showed it. You seemed so together." I smiled sadly. "That's what mothers do, isn't it? We stay strong for our children, even when we're crumbling inside. But Rebecca, using my home as your security blanket isn't the answer to your fears. It just transfers the insecurity to me." She nodded slowly. "I see that now. I wasn't thinking about how it would affect you. I was only thinking about solving my own problems." "And Nathan?" I asked. "What's driving his determination to control my assets?" Rebecca hesitated. "It's complicated. He's always been the planner, the one who needs everything organized and accounted for. But lately, it's gotten more intense. After his colleague Phil had to move in with his adult children because he lost everything in bad investments, Nathan's obsessed with making sure that never happens to any of us. So he decided the solution was to take control of my home before I could potentially mismanage it. Something like that, she admitted. Plus, I think he genuinely believes you're more vulnerable than you realize. The fall scared him, Mom, more than he lets on. I considered this, trying to see the situation through my son's eyes. Nathan had always been the protector, even as a child. The one who checked the locks before bed, who researched safety ratings before I bought a new car, who insisted on accompanying me to medical appointments after James died. His controlling behavior had roots in love, however misguided its expression had become. I understand his concerns, I said finally, but the solution isn't to strip me of my autonomy. It's to work with me to address legitimate safety issues while respecting my right to make my own decisions. Rebecca nodded, looking genuinely remorseful. I know that now, and I've been thinking a lot about your proposal. It's fair, Mom. More than fair, considering what we tried to do. And Nathan, she sighed. He's still processing. His pride is hurt, and you know how he gets when he feels he's lost control of a situation. I did know. Nathan had always struggled when life deviated from his carefully constructed plans. From the time his college application to Princeton was rejected to the market crash that had decimated his clients' portfolios, despite his meticulous forecasting. Will you sign the family care agreement? I asked directly. Rebecca met my eyes. Yes, I already have. I brought my copy with me. She reached into her purse and pulled out the document, her signature fresh on the last page. Nathan will come around eventually. He always does when he runs out of alternatives. I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. Not completely, but enough to breathe more easily. Thank you, Rebecca. This means a lot to me. She reached across the table and took my hand. I'm sorry, Mom. Really sorry. I got caught up in my own fears and forgot who you are. Who you've always been, the strongest person I know. The compliment warmed me, though I knew my own strength had limits that would only become more apparent with time. I'm not invincible, Rebecca. I know that better than anyone. I will need help eventually. Perhaps sooner than I'd like to admit. But I need to be a participant in planning for that future, not a bystander. I understand, she said. And for the first time in weeks, I believed she truly did. After Rebecca left, I called Olivia to update her on this unexpected development. Her delight at her aunt's change of heart was tempered by concern about her father's continued resistance. Dad's stubborn, she said, stating the obvious. But he's not unreasonable. Not when he really thinks things through. Give him time, Grandma. Time is something I have in increasingly limited supply, I reminded her, only half joking. All the more reason for him to stop wasting it on power struggles. She replied with the clear-eyed wisdom of youth. That evening, Martha Peterson came over for our now regular Saturday night game of gin rummy. I told her about Rebecca's visit as we played, her shrewd eyes assessing me over her cards. 1 down, 1 to go, she said, laying down a winning hand. Though in my experience, it's usually the sons who hold out longest. Something about admitting their mothers know what they're doing seems particularly difficult for them. I laughed, shuffling the cards for another round. Nathan has always needed to be right. Even as a child, he'd argue his point until everyone else gave up from exhaustion. Sounds like my Harold, Martha said fondly. That man would rather drive in circles for an hour than admit he was lost. But he came around on the important things. Eventually. I hope Nathan does too, I said, dealing the next hand. I miss my son. Martha picked up her cards, arranging them methodically. He'll come back to you. Eleanor, children always do, once they realize the alternative is losing something precious. Her words stayed with me as I prepared for bed that night, echoing in my mind as I moved through my evening routine. The same one I'd followed for decades, the familiar rhythm of washing my face, applying moisturizer, brushing my teeth, checking the locks, these small rituals of self-care and security that grounded me in my identity, my home, my life. In the quiet of my bedroom, surrounded by the artifacts of my history with James, his reading glasses still in the drawer of his nightstand, his robe still hanging on the back of the bathroom door, I felt both the weight of my solitude and the strength of my resolve. I would not be erased from my own story, not by well-meaning children, not by the inevitable challenges of aging, not by fear of an uncertain future. As I drifted toward sleep, I thought about the ripples spreading outward from my small act of rebellion, Rebecca's tearful confession, Olivia's fierce support, Martha's practical solidarity. By standing firm, I had not only protected myself, but had perhaps created space for more honest conversations about aging, autonomy, and the complex dynamics of family love. It wasn't a complete resolution. Nathan's anger still hung between us like an unspoken accusation. But it was a beginning, a reminder that even at 73, I was still capable of growth, of change, of influencing the world around me in meaningful ways. That night, I dreamed of James. We were walking along the beach where we'd spent our honeymoon, young again, our whole lives ahead of us. "You're doing fine, Ellie," he said, his voice as clear as if he were truly beside me. "Keep going. The best is yet to come." I woke with tears on my cheeks, but a curious lightness in my heart. Whatever came next, reconciliation or continued conflict, gradual decline or unexpected resilience, I would face it on my own terms, with my dignity intact and my voice unsilenced. That, I realized, was victory enough. 3 weeks passed. Rebecca visited regularly, our relationship slowly healing through honest conversations and shared activities. We planted a new rose bush together, a variety called Resilience with deep crimson blooms, a fitting symbol of our renewed connection. Olivia came by often, sometimes bringing her younger brother Tyler, who helped install additional safety features around the house with the enthusiasm of a Boy Scout, earning merit badges. Nathan remained distant. He called occasionally, his conversations brief and formal, focused on practical matters rather than the emotional breach between us. I didn't push, understanding that his process would unfold in its own time, if at all. Some wounds, I had learned over my 7 decades, heal slowly or leave permanent scars. On a crisp autumn morning, I was sorting through James's old files in the study, a task I had postponed for years. When the doorbell rang, the video screen showed Nathan standing on my porch, alone, his expression unreadable. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for whatever might come, and opened the door. "Hello, Nathan," I said simply. He nodded, his posture stiff. "Mom, may I come in?" I stepped aside, noting the leather portfolio tucked under his arm, so similar to the one he had brought that fateful day months ago. We moved to the living room, the formality between us painful after a lifetime of easy affection. Nathan sat on the edge of the sofa, placing the portfolio on the coffee table between us. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," he began, his voice carefully controlled. "About what happened, about what I tried to do." I waited, giving him space to continue at his own pace. "I've spoken with Rebecca and with Olivia." A flash of something, annoyance, respect, crossed his face at the mention of his daughter. "They both think I've been unreasonable." "And what do you think?" I asked quietly. He met my eyes directly for the first time. "I think I was scared. And when I'm scared, I try to control things. It's what I do professionally. Identify risks, create safeguards, establish contingency plans. It's how I make sense of an unpredictable world." The admission surprised me with its self-awareness. Nathan had always presented himself as driven by logic rather than emotion. "Your fall," he continued. It triggered something in me. Suddenly, I could see all these potential scenarios. You injured with no one to help. You making financial decisions without proper guidance. You vulnerable to scammers or predatory services. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so like his father's that my heart clenched. I convinced myself that taking control was the only responsible solution, without discussing it with me. I pointed out. Yes, he acknowledged. That was wrong, deeply wrong. I treated you like you were already incapacitated when you've shown nothing but competence and resilience since Dad died. He paused, swallowing hard. I owe you an apology, Mom. A real one, not a qualified one. The words hung between us, unexpected and powerful. Nathan had never been one to admit mistakes easily. I'm listening, I said. He straightened, meeting my gaze directly. I'm sorry for trying to manipulate you into signing away your rights to your home. I'm sorry for treating you as less than capable. I'm sorry for putting my need for control above your right to autonomy. It was disrespectful and unworthy of the values you and Dad raised us with. The apology was more complete, more honest than I had dared to hope for. I felt tears threatening, but held them back, wanting to honor the moment with clarity rather than emotion. Thank you, Nathan. I accept your apology. He nodded, then reached for the portfolio. I've brought something. 2 things, actually. He removed a document I recognized as the family care agreement. First, this. I've signed it, as Rebecca did. It's a good framework. Balanced, practical, respectful. I should have seen that immediately instead of letting my pride get in the way. He handed it to me, his signature bold and clear beside Rebecca's on the final page. The sight of it, tangible evidence of his acceptance of my terms, brought a sense of closure I hadn't realized I needed. And second, he continued, pulling out another document. This is something I've prepared. It's not a requirement or a condition, just an offer for you to consider. I took it cautiously, scanning the title. Independent Living Support Plan. What is this? It's a proposal for how I might support your continued independence without interfering with your autonomy, he explained. Financial planning services, home maintenance coordination, technology updates, practical assistance that respects your decision-making authority. I leafed through the document, noting the careful balance between support and respect, the absence of controlling language, the emphasis on collaboration rather than management. This is thoughtful, I said, genuinely impressed. You've put considerable work into this. It's what I should have done from the beginning, he admitted. Approached the situation as your son, not your financial advisor. Asked how I could help rather than assuming I knew what was best. The shift in his perspective was remarkable. From seeing me as a problem to manage to recognizing me as a person to support. I wondered what had catalyzed such a profound change. What brought you to this realization? I asked. Nathan was quiet for a moment, considering. Several things. Conversations with Olivia. She has a way of cutting through my defenses that's both irritating and impressive. A small smile softened his features. And something my client Phil said. The one who lost his investments? Nathan looked surprised that I remembered. Yes. I ran into him last week. He's living with his daughter now, as you know. I expected him to be diminished somehow. Defeated, but he wasn't. He was helping his grandchildren with a science project, laughing, fully engaged. When I mentioned how well he seemed to be adapting, he said something I can't stop thinking about. Nathan paused, his expression thoughtful. He said, Nathan, I lost my money, not my worth. My daughter reminds me of that every day. She doesn't need my financial contribution. She needs my stories, my time, my presence in her children's lives. That's the real inheritance. The wisdom in those words hung between us, profound in their simplicity. It made me think about what I've been focusing on, Nathan continued. The house, the assets, the financial planning, all the tangible things that can be measured and managed. But I've been missing the intangible wealth you still have to offer. Your experience, your perspective, your place in our family narrative. His insight moved me deeply. That's all I've wanted, Nathan. To be seen as more than a problem to solve or an asset to manage. To be recognized as still fully present in my own life. I see you now, Mom, he said quietly. I'm sorry it took me so long. The tension that had held my body rigid for months began to dissolve. Not completely. There were still conversations to be had, trust to be rebuilt, but enough to feel like breathing deeply for the first time since discovering their deception. Where do we go from here? I asked. Nathan leaned forward, his expression earnest. We start over. We talk, really talk, about your needs and wishes for the future. We plan together, with you leading the conversation rather than being excluded from it. And he hesitated, then continued with newfound humility. I learned to accept that I can't control everything, including how and when you'll need assistance. That sounds like a good beginning. I agreed. We talked for nearly 2 hours, covering ground we should have explored months ago. My concerns about maintaining independence as I aged, his fears about being unprepared for my eventual decline, practical steps we could take together to address both our needs. The conversation wasn't always easy, but it was honest in a way our interactions hadn't been since James died. As Nathan prepared to leave, he paused at the door. There's one more thing, Mom. Rebecca and I have been talking. We'd like to have a family dinner here next Sunday. You, us, the kids. Maybe even Martha from across the street since she's practically family now. Nothing formal, just reconnecting. The invitation, so normal, so ordinary, yet so significant after the breach between us, brought unexpected tears to my eyes. I'd like that very much, I managed to say. Nathan hesitated, then stepped forward and embraced me. Not the perfunctory hug of recent years, but a real embrace. The kind that conveyed genuine emotion. I love you, Mom. That never changed even when I was being an idiot. I laughed through my tears, returning his embrace. I love you too, Nathan, even when you're being an idiot. After he left, I sat in James's chair, processing the unexpected turn of events. The reconciliation I had hoped for but hadn't dared expect had begun, not with dramatic declarations or complete resolution of all issues, but with something more sustainable. Honest communication, mutual respect, and recognition of both our vulnerabilities and our strengths. I picked up my journal and wrote, Today Nathan returned, not just physically, but emotionally. The wall between us has not completely fallen, but there are now doors where before there were only solid barriers. I am reminded that even the deepest wounds can begin to heal when we find the courage to see each other clearly. Not as projections of our fears or extensions of our needs, but as fully human, with all the complexity and dignity that entails. The family dinner the following Sunday filled my home with noise and laughter for the first time in months. Rebecca brought her famous lasagna, Nathan grilled steaks on the patio, and the grandchildren moved through the rooms with the easy familiarity of those who know they belong. Martha joined us, bringing her legendary apple pie and sharp wit, fitting seamlessly into our gathering. As I looked around my dining room table, expanded to its full length to accommodate everyone, I felt a profound sense of rightness. This was what mattered. Not who owned the house, but who filled it with life. Not who controlled the assets, but who shared the moments that gave those assets meaning. After dinner, as the younger generation cleared the table with good-natured complaints about whose turn it was to wash dishes, Nathan, Rebecca, and I moved to the porch with cups of coffee. The evening air was cool, but pleasant, carrying the scent of the roses James and I had planted decades ago. This was nice, Rebecca said, leaning back in her chair. We should do it more often. We will, Nathan replied with unexpected certainty. Regular family dinners, at least once a month, rotating between our homes. I smiled at his characteristic need to establish a system, but this time it didn't feel controlling, just organized in a comforting way. Speaking of homes, Rebecca began hesitantly, I wanted to tell you both something. I've been approved for a mortgage refinance. It's going to make a huge difference in my monthly payments. That's wonderful news, I said, genuinely pleased for her. Financial stability had been elusive for Rebecca since her divorce. Nathan nodded approvingly. Smart move with the current rates. Did you lock in for 30 years? As they discussed the details of her refinance, I realized something important. Rebecca's financial anxiety was being addressed through her own agency, not through designs on my property. She was finding her security through legitimate means, rather than looking to my assets as her safety net. I've been thinking, I said when there was a natural pause in their conversation, about making some modifications to the house. Nothing major, just some updates to make it more accessible as I get older. Replacing the tub with a walk-in shower, maybe a ramp at the side entrance, instead of jumping in with suggestions or taking over the planning as they might have months ago. Both Nathan and Rebecca simply nodded. Sounds sensible. Nathan said, Do you want recommendations for contractors, or help researching options? Rebecca offered. Both would be welcome, I replied, appreciating their supportive but non-directive approach. I'd like to be proactive about these changes rather than waiting until they become urgent necessities. That's very dad of you, Rebecca said with a small smile. He was always planning 3 steps ahead, one of many things I learned from him. I acknowledged, along with the importance of reading the fine print. Nathan winced slightly but then laughed. A lesson I won't forget any time soon. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. From inside came the sound of the grandchildren laughing, the clatter of dishes being put away, the familiar creaks of my old house accommodating the movement of family within its walls. You know, Rebecca said thoughtfully, I've been so focused on what might happen to this house eventually that I forgot to appreciate what it is right now. A home. Our home, in many ways. Even though we don't live here anymore, it will always be your home, I assured her. No matter who owns it or lives in it in the future, the memories we've created here belong to all of us. Nathan reached over and took my hand, a gesture of affection he had rarely initiated since becoming an adult. Thanks for not giving up on us, Mom, even when we gave you every reason to. Family doesn't give up, I said simply. We may disappoint each other, hurt each other, even betray each other at times, but we find our way back if we're willing to see each other with clear eyes and open hearts. As the evening deepened into night, with stars appearing one by one in the darkening sky, I felt a sense of completion, not of my life's journey, which still had chapters to unfold, but of this particular story. The crisis that had begun with a document placed before me for my unquestioning signature had transformed into something unexpected, a catalyst for greater understanding, more authentic relationships, and a renewed appreciation for the strength that comes not from control, but from connection. Later that night, after everyone had gone home with promises to return soon, I stood in my kitchen, the heart of my home, and felt James's presence as strongly as if he stood beside me. We did all right, didn't we? I asked the empty room, knowing somehow that he could hear me. With the kids, with this home, with the life we built. There was no audible answer, of course, but in the gentle settling of the old house around me, in the lingering warmth of family gathered and reconciled, I felt his response as clearly as if he had spoken. Yes, Ellie, we did more than all right. And so will you. I picked up my journal one last time that night and wrote what would be the final entry on this particular chapter of my life. They made me sign a document, but they never read what I wrote. Not just the clause that protected my legal rights, but the deeper message written between the lines. That dignity is not diminished by age. That autonomy is not a luxury, but a necessity. That true family support empowers rather than diminishes. It was a lesson hard learned on all sides, but perhaps the most valuable one I could leave them. Not a house, not financial assets, but the understanding that each of us, at every age, deserves to be the author of our own story, the sovereign of our own kingdom, however humble or magnificent it may be. That is my true legacy, not what I leave behind when I'm gone, but how I insist on living while I'm here. The seasons turned as they always do, bringing changes both subtle and profound. Spring blossomed into summer, summer mellowed into autumn, autumn surrendered to winter, and winter finally yielded once more to spring. Through it all, my life settled into new rhythms, different from before, but satisfying in their own way. The house underwent thoughtful modifications, grab bars installed in strategic locations, a walk-in shower replacing the old tub, a ramp at the side entrance that blended so naturally with the landscaping that visitors barely noticed it. Nathan had researched contractors specializing in aging in place renovations, while Rebecca had an eye for designs that were both functional and aesthetically pleasing. Together, we transformed my home into a space that would accommodate my changing needs without sacrificing its character or my independence. Our family dinners became a cherished tradition, rotating between our homes, but most often held at mine, the natural gathering place that held our shared history in its very walls. The grandchildren came and went with easy familiarity, sometimes staying overnight in the same rooms their parents had once occupied, creating new layers of memories atop the old. Nathan and I established a weekly meeting, not to monitor my finances or question my decisions, but to collaborate on planning for various contingencies. We called it our "What If" session, approaching potential challenges with pragmatism rather than fear. What if I needed temporary assistance after a medical procedure? What if maintaining the yard became too difficult? What if I eventually needed daily help with certain tasks? Each question was addressed with respect for my preferences and recognition of practical realities. Rebecca found her financial footing, her refinanced mortgage providing stability she hadn't known since her divorce. She stopped eyeing my possessions with barely concealed anxiety, and instead began asking about their stories. The history of the grandfather clock, the provenance of James's book collection, the memories attached to the china cabinet in the dining room. I shared these histories gladly, knowing now that her interest came from a desire to preserve family legacy rather than calculate potential assets. Olivia, my unexpected ally during the darkest days of our family conflict, continued her role as my tech support and confidant. She installed a smart home system that allowed me to control lights, temperature, and security features from my phone or through voice commands. "Keeping you on the cutting edge, Grandma," she would say with a grin. But more valuable than the technology was her regular presence in my life, stopping by between classes, calling just to chat, treating me as both a beloved grandmother and a person whose thoughts and opinions mattered. Martha Peterson remained my steadfast friend, our Saturday night gin rummy games expanding to include other neighbors, forming an informal support network of seniors looking out for one another. We shared resources, exchanged recommendations for services, and most importantly, provided each other with companionship that combated the isolation that too often accompanies aging. On the anniversary of the day I had discovered my children's attempt to take control of my home, I decided to host a special dinner, not to commemorate the betrayal, but to celebrate the healing that had followed, the hard-won wisdom, the rebuilt trust, the deeper understanding we now shared. As we gathered around my dining room table, Nathan and his wife, Rebecca and her new boyfriend, a kind-eyed professor she had met at a community lecture series, all 4 grandchildren, Martha, and me, I raised my glass for a toast. "To family," I said simply. "Not perfect, but perfectly ours." The glasses clinked, the conversation flowed, and laughter filled the rooms of the home that remained mine in both legal fact and emotional truth. Later, as the evening wound down, Nathan found me alone in the kitchen, putting away the last of the dessert plates. "Happy anniversary, Mom," he said with a wry smile. "Though I'm not sure this is one we should actually celebrate," I chuckled, handing him a dish towel. "Not the conflict, certainly, but what came from it. Yes, I think that's worth acknowledging." He dried a plate thoughtfully. "I was so wrong. About so many things. We all were, in different ways," I said generously. "I should have been more direct about my concerns and wishes long before things reached a crisis point." Nathan shook his head. "Always the diplomat, trying to share the blame. But we both know where the fault primarily lay." He put down the towel and turned to face me fully. "You know what I realize now? I was so focused on protecting your future that I was willing to sacrifice your present, your dignity, your autonomy, your joy in living independently." "What kind of protection is that?" "The misguided kind that comes from love and fear all mixed together," I replied. "The human kind." He smiled at that. "When did you get so wise?" "Around the time you were learning to tie your shoes," I teased. "You just weren't paying attention." We finished the dishes in companionable silence, the easy rhythm of shared work a testament to how far we had come. When everything was put away, Nathan hesitated, then pulled an envelope from his pocket. "I have something for you. It's not exactly a gift, more of a recognition." Curious, I opened the envelope to find a legal document, a formal revocation of the original property agreement I had signed with my handwritten clause, replacing it with a simple acknowledgement that I retained full ownership and control of my home, with no conditions or restrictions. "You didn't need to do this," I said, touched by the gesture nonetheless. "The family care agreement we all signed covers everything." "I wanted to," Nathan replied. "A clean slate. No lingering legal shadows from my overreach." I folded the document carefully and returned it to the envelope. "Thank you. This means a great deal to me." Later that night, after everyone had gone and the house had settled into its nighttime creaks and sighs, I sat in James's chair in the study, feeling his presence as I often did in quiet moments. "We came through it, James," I said softly to the empty room. "Not without scars, but perhaps stronger for having weathered the storm together." I thought about the journey of the past year, from betrayal to reconciliation, from hurt to healing, from misunderstanding to mutual respect. It hadn't been easy or straightforward. There had been setbacks along the way, moments when old patterns threatened to reassert themselves, times when trust still felt fragile and tentative. But we had persevered, all of us, choosing connection over control, understanding over assumption, love over fear. And in that perseverance, we had discovered something precious, a new way of being family that honored each member's dignity and autonomy while acknowledging our interdependence and shared vulnerability. We had learned, painfully but profoundly, that true support doesn't diminish the one being supported, but rather upholds their essential personhood, even as their needs change. As I prepared for bed that night, following my familiar routine with the comfortable ease of long habit, I caught sight of my reflection in the bathroom mirror. The face that looked back at me bore the marks of 74 years of living, lines etched by laughter and grief, silver hair that had once been chestnut brown, skin that had lost the firmness of youth, but gained the character of experience. It was not a young face, certainly, but neither was it the face of someone diminished or defeated. It was the face of a woman who had stood her ground, who had insisted on her right to remain the author of her own story, who had taught her children through both confrontation and forgiveness that dignity is not negotiable at any age. "They made me sign a document," I whispered to my reflection. "But they never read what I wrote." What I had written, in the end, was not just a legal clause protecting my property rights, but a declaration of personhood that transcended legal language. A statement that even as my body aged and my needs changed, my essential self, my right to choice, to respect, to meaningful participations in decisions affecting my life, remained inviolate. That was the lesson worth passing down through generations. Not the house, not the financial assets, not even the family heirlooms with their rich histories, but this fundamental truth that each of us, at every stage of life, deserves to be seen not as a problem to be managed, but as a person to be honored. As I turned out the light and settled into bed, I felt a profound sense of peace. Not because all challenges had been resolved or all future difficulties averted, but because we had found a way forward together, with our dignity intact and our connections deepened by the very conflict that might have severed them permanently. In the darkness, I smiled. Whatever came next, and there would surely be new challenges as I continued to age, I would face it neither alone nor diminished, but surrounded by a family that had learned, through painful experience, the true meaning of love and respect. That, I realized as sleep began to claim me, was victory indeed. 5 years have passed since I added those fateful words to a document my children never expected me to read carefully. I am 78 now, and time has brought its inevitable changes, some welcome, others less so. My arthritis has worsened, making my morning routine slower and occasionally painful. My eyesight requires stronger prescription lenses each year. My energy wanes earlier in the day than it once did. These are the ordinary diminishments of aging, neither surprising nor catastrophic, simply part of the journey we all make, if we're fortunate enough to live long lives. But time has brought gifts as well. Nathan's oldest, Olivia, married last spring in a ceremony held in my backyard, the same spot where her father had played as a child, where James and I had hosted countless summer barbecues, where generations of our family had gathered to mark life's passages. "It had to be here, Grandma," she had insisted. "This place holds all of us." Rebecca found not just financial stability but emotional fulfillment in her relationship with Professor David Harrington, whom she married in a small ceremony 2 years ago. He moved into her home rather than the reverse, understanding instinctively her need for security after years of uncertainty. "He doesn't try to fix everything for me," she told me once. "He just stands beside me while I fix things myself." Nathan softened in ways I never expected, his rigid planning impulses tempered by a growing appreciation for life's unpredictability. When his carefully structured retirement portfolio took an unexpected hit during a market downturn, he surprised everyone by shrugging philosophically. "It's just money," he said. "We'll adjust." The Nathan of 6 years ago would never have uttered such words. As for me, I remain in my home, though with more support than before. A home health aide visits twice weekly, not because my children insisted, but because I recognize the wisdom in having professional assistance with certain tasks. Smart home technology, installed and regularly updated by Olivia, allows me to control my environment with voice commands when my hands are uncooperative. A meal delivery service brings fresh ingredients that I still enjoy cooking when energy permits. These accommodations represent not surrender to dependency, but thoughtful adaptation to changing realities. Adaptations I chose, researched, and implemented with my family's support, rather than at their direction. The distinction makes all the difference. Today is a special day, the 80th anniversary of when James's parents purchased this house, beginning its long history as our family home. To mark the occasion, I've invited everyone for a gathering that feels particularly significant, though they don't yet know why. They arrive in waves throughout the afternoon. Nathan and his wife, Rebecca and David, all 4 grandchildren, including Olivia with her new husband, Martha from across the street, now using a walker but still sharp as ever, and several neighbors who have become like extended family over the years. The house fills with the comfortable chaos of multiple generations. Conversations overlapping, laughter erupting in different rooms, the youngest great-nieces and nephews racing through hallways despite half-hearted admonitions from their parents. I move through it all somewhat more slowly than in years past, but with deep satisfaction, observing the life that continues to flourish within these walls. When everyone has arrived and settled with plates of food on laps or balanced on side tables, I gently tap a spoon against my water glass. The conversations gradually quiet as attention turns my way. "Thank you all for coming today," I begin. "As some of you know, this house has been in our family for exactly 80 years. James's parents bought it as newlyweds in 1944, passed it to us in 1976, and it's been the center of our family life ever since." Nods and murmurs of agreement ripple through the gathering. "What you don't know is that I've made a decision about its future. A decision I've considered carefully and discussed with my attorney, but that I haven't shared with anyone until now." I notice Nathan and Rebecca exchange glances, a flash of their old anxiety quickly masked. But they remain silent, waiting respectfully for me to continue. A small but significant indication of how far we've come. "I've established a family trust," I explain. "Upon my death, this house will belong to all of you collectively, not as an asset to be sold and divided, but as a shared family home to be maintained for future generations." Surprise registers on every face. This is not what any of them expected. "The trust includes funds for maintenance and property taxes," I continue. "The terms specify that the house cannot be sold unless all adult family members unanimously agree. Any family member may stay here when needed, during transitions, in emergencies, or simply for gatherings like this one. The day-to-day management will rotate among those willing to take on the responsibility, with decisions about major repairs or renovations made collectively." I pause, looking around at their stunned expressions. "In other words, this house will continue to be what it has always been. A haven, a gathering place, a physical embodiment of our connection to each other." Nathan is the first to find his voice. "Mom, this is... I don't know what to say. It's incredibly generous, but also a huge responsibility." "Yes," I acknowledge. "It is both those things. Just like family itself." Rebecca's eyes are bright with tears. "So it will always be here? For all of us?" "That's the intention," I confirm. "Not as anyone's individual property, but as our shared inheritance. Not just the structure, but everything it represents." Olivia, always quick to grasp implications, asks the practical question. "What if someone needs the money they would have received from selling their portion?" "The trust includes provisions for that as well," I explain. "There's a separate financial component that will be divided equally. The house itself is extra, something preserved rather than liquidated." As they absorb this information, I see a range of emotions cross their faces. Surprise, gratitude, perhaps a touch of trepidation about the shared responsibility. But underlying it all is understanding. They recognize this arrangement for what it is, not just a practical solution for a physical asset, but a symbolic continuation of the lesson we learned together through conflict and reconciliation. That family is not about control, but connection. That inheritance is not just financial, but emotional and spiritual. That the true value of a home lies not in its market price, but in the memories it holds and the future gatherings it will shelter. Later, as the party continues around me, Nathan finds a moment to speak with me privately. "This isn't what I expected," he admits. "I thought you'd eventually sell, move into something smaller." "I considered that option," I tell him honestly, "but this solution felt right. Not just for me, but for all of us. This house has been a battleground, but it's also been our sanctuary. I wanted its story to continue beyond me. He nods slowly. It's fitting somehow. The house we once fought over becoming something that requires us to cooperate, to think of each other's needs alongside our own. Exactly, I say, pleased that he understands so completely. As evening approaches and the gathering begins to wind down, I find myself sitting on the porch swing with Martha, watching the younger generations play an impromptu game of touch football. On the lawn, the same lawn where James had taught Nathan to throw a spiral, where Rebecca had practiced cheerleading routines, where countless family pets had romped over decades. You've done a remarkable thing, Martha observes. Not just with the house, but with them. She nods toward my family, now laughing as one of the teenagers makes a spectacular catch. They've learned to see you. Really see you. We've learned to see each other, I correct gently. That's the real gift. Martha pats my hand, her skin as paper-thin as my own, marked with the same liver spots and prominent veins that map our journeys through time. You know, when Harold died, everyone assumed I'd fall apart. Poor Martha, they said, all alone in that big house. But they didn't understand that being alone isn't the same as being lonely, and that independence isn't just for the young. No, it isn't, I agree. Though I've learned that independence doesn't have to mean isolation either. There's strength in knowing when to accept help, as long as it's offered with respect. We rock in comfortable silence for a while, watching the family tableau unfold before us. 4 generations connected by blood and choice, history and hope. They made me sign a document, I say finally, sharing with Martha the phrase that has become something of a personal mantra. But they never read what I wrote, she chuckles, understanding immediately. And what you wrote was bigger than any legal clause, wasn't it? It was a declaration of personhood. Exactly, I say, grateful for her perception. A reminder that I may be aging, but I am not fading, that my voice matters, my choices count, my dignity remains intact, even as my body gradually becomes less cooperative. As the sun begins to set, casting long shadows across the yard where my family continues their game, I feel a profound sense of completion. Not of my life, which still has chapters to unfold, days to be lived fully, moments to be savored, but of the particular journey that began with a betrayal and culminated in this day of celebration and continuity. The document my children asked me to sign without reading has long since been legally nullified, replaced by arrangements that honor rather than diminish my autonomy. But its legacy lives on in the transformed relationships that surround me, in the deeper understanding we now share about what it means to age with dignity, to support without controlling, to love without diminishing. That night, after everyone has gone, and the house settles back into its familiar quietude, I sit at my desk and open my journal, the same one in which I first recorded my shock and hurt at discovering my children's deception. I turn to a fresh page and write. Today, I shared my decision about the house's future, not as a reaction to fear or an attempt to control from beyond the grave, but as an invitation to continue what we have begun. This delicate, beautiful balance of independence and interconnection, of individual dignity and collective responsibility. The document they once asked me to sign would have reduced me to a footnote in my own life story. The trust I've established instead ensures that none of us becomes merely a name on a deed or a number in a will, that we remain always fully present to each other as complete human beings worthy of respect and voice. This, then, is my true legacy, not the house itself, though it will shelter future generations, not the financial provisions, though they will provide practical support, but the understanding that has grown from conflict, the wisdom harvested from hurt, the recognition that has blossomed from confrontation. They made me sign a document, But they never read what I wrote, and what I wrote, in the end, was a new chapter in our family story, one in which aging brings not diminishment, but deepening, in which vulnerability invites not control, but connection, in which the final years of life are not an epilogue, but a vital, meaningful continuation of the narrative. That is worth more than any house, any asset, any inheritance. That is the gift we give each other, across generations, when we truly see one another. Not as we wish each other to be, not as we fear each other might become, but as we actually are. Imperfect, evolving, worthy of dignity at every stage of our journey through this precious, temporary miracle called life. I close the journal and place it in the drawer where it will remain. A record of our family's transformation, a testament to resilience and growth, a reminder that even the deepest wounds can become, with time and courage, the spaces where the most profound healing occurs. Outside my window, the moon rises over the neighborhood where I have spent most of my life. Its light touches the roses James and I planted, the swing set installed for grandchildren, the new ramp that allows me easier access to the garden. Past, present, and future, all illuminated by the same gentle glow. I am 78 years old. My body aches in new places each morning. My memory occasionally falters on details it once held effortlessly. My energy ebbs earlier each day than it did the year before. But I am still here, still myself, still the author of my own story. They made me sign a document, but they never read what I wrote. And what I wrote was this: I am not finished yet.